The cannon smoke hadn't even cleared over Morro Castle, and in London a clerk was already going pale. The fortress fell at sunset. August 1762. 44 days of siege, grenadiers in sweat-stained redcoats ramming the Union Jack into the ramparts. Havana taken. The harbor open. Victory, loud and absolute. The bands played. The dispatches wrote themselves. Glory, empire, dominion. And while the soldiers were still cheering, someone looked down at the water. A Spanish treasure fleet was slipping over the horizon. Silver, spices, value that would never be taxed by London. The most liquid prize of the entire operation just exited the frame. They took the castle. The treasure took the horizon. The bill stayed in London, and the clerk was already adding it up. He sat in a cramped Treasury office, candles burning low, running the same column of figures for the third time because the result was too ugly to believe. Britain had been winning the 7 Years' War everywhere. North America, the Caribbean, India, Europe, and every victory had been bought with borrowed money. The strategy was simple. Spend whatever it takes, win first. Figure out the bill later. The map would show a global superpower. The ledger would show a patient on credit life support. When the Treaty of Paris ended the war in February 1763, Britain gained Florida, Canada, everything east of the Mississippi. The new map looked like dominance without limit. The clerk sat down with the final accounts and found a national debt of roughly £133 million. Numbers from that era are debated, but the scale is not. Annual interest payments alone now consumed about 60% of government spending. Let that sit. For every pound the government spent, 12 shillings went to creditors before a single soldier was paid, before a single ship was repaired, before a single warehouse was stocked. The map said superpower. The Treasury said debtor on a 60% interest diet. The clerk didn't sleep that night. He just kept staring at the numbers, and the numbers stared back, and they both knew the same thing. The bill wasn't done with them yet. Because debt alone doesn't lose empires. Plenty of countries carry heavy debt and stagger forward. The damage lives in the decision about who pays. And Britain had just acquired a very expensive new problem. 10,000 troops needed to be stationed in North America to secure the new frontier, defending colonists from French remnants, managing relations with native nations, maintaining the visible fact of British control. The annual bill for this garrison was roughly £350,000. British land tax was already at record levels. Raising it further would be political poison. Landowners in Parliament would scream. The Treasury sat in a vice. Pay for the garrison or lose the territory. Raise taxes at home or try something new. Winning was like buying a mansion you cannot afford to heat. The mortgage was terrifying. The heating bill is where the screaming started, and the clerk, looking at the ledgers, knew exactly who was about to get the invoice. George Grenville became Prime Minister in 1763. He was not a cartoon villain twirling a mustache. He was a competent administrator staring at a fiscal nightmare. The debt interest was crushing. The garrison was expensive. British landowners were already furious about taxes. Grenville ran the numbers, the same numbers the clerk had been running, and concluded the colonies should contribute. First came the Sugar Act in 1764, tightening trade enforcement. Then came the Stamp Act in 1765. The Stamp Act required stamped paper for legal documents, newspapers, playing cards, ship manifests, and paper goods. Every lawyer, every printer, every merchant, every ship captain would feel it immediately. This was not a tax on some abstraction called the colonial economy. This was a tax on the information infrastructure of 18th century society. Printers were the social media of the era. Lawyers were the political class. Merchants were the money. The Stamp Act was perfectly designed to enrage the three groups best equipped to organize resistance. Grenville looked at the debt, looked at the map, and essentially handed the colonies a receipt. The line items read, "Your defense, £350,000 per year, service charge not included. A printer in Boston opened his shop one morning in 1765. Every newspaper, every pamphlet, every legal form now required a stamped paper purchased from a government distributor. His costs jumped. His customers, lawyers and merchants and ship captains, were livid. The stamp did not land gently on some distant government ledger. It landed on the editor's front page. The captain's manifest. The lawyer's fee. These are not people you want to annoy simultaneously. And they were not quietly annoyed. They were organized, literate, and loud. The clerk in London, still running numbers, heard the news and felt a cold thing settle in his stomach. He had seen what happens when a bill hits the wrong people at the wrong time. The math was fine. The politics was effuse. Summer and fall of 1765. Stamp distributors were hanged in effigy. Their houses were ransacked. Mobs in Boston destroyed the home of Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchinson, a man who privately opposed the Stamp Act but was targeted anyway because the rage had no interest in nuance. Boycotts of British goods spread through the colonies like fire through dry timber. In October, the Stamp Act Congress met in New York, bringing together delegates from 9 colonies. They issued a Declaration of Rights and Grievances. No taxation without representation. That phrase was not a slogan yet. It was a constitutional argument. Parliament taxed them without their consent. The British saw a fair bill for services rendered. The colonists saw a principal being stolen. Parliament thought it was the boss sending a reasonable invoice. The colonies thought it was an unauthorized agent spending their money. Both sides were logically consistent and politically incompatible. That is the scariest kind of conflict. The one where nobody is simply crazy. The Crown said, "We saved you from the French." The colonies said, "We didn't vote for that war, and we're not paying the invoice." Parliament backed down in 1766. The Stamp Act was repealed. Celebrations erupted in the colonies. Bonfires, toasts, relief, and then the Declaratory Act passed in the same breath, asserting Parliament's absolute right to legislate for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. The repeal was not a retreat. It was a tactical pause. The debt hadn't gone anywhere. The garrison still needed funding. The same arithmetic that produced the Stamp Act was still running, still hungry, still waiting. They canceled the Stamp Act. They didn't cancel the debt. So the bill put on a new hat and knocked again. The Townshend Acts arrived in 1767. New taxes on glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea. The colonists, now organized and suspicious and watching every move from London, saw the new taxes as proof that the repeal was never sincere. The original bill had become a repeating charge on a relationship that was deeply overdrawn. The debt created an inescapable logic. Tax, revolt, repeal, retax, deeper revolt. Every time the bill came back, it returned with a worse name and a worse attitude, and every return confirmed exactly what the colonists feared. The clerk, by now an old hand at ugly ledgers, watched the cycle and knew where it ended. You cannot run a debt like this without eventually running out of other people's money. And when that happens, the receipt doesn't just ask for payment, it asks for blood. Shots fired at Lexington and Concord in 1775. The Revolution began, not as a unified independence movement, but as armed resistance that escalated beyond anyone's ability to control. And here is the brutal irony that should make anyone with an economics degree grab their head with both hands. Britain now spent even more borrowed money to suppress the rebellion. The tax that was supposed to pay for the last war started a new one, and the new one was way more expensive. The empire that won the 7 Years' War would lose its 13 most dynamic colonies, not to a rival empire, but to its own former subjects. The debt did not cause the revolution alone. Constitutional principle, identity, self-government, these were central. But the debt was the detonator. It turned a political argument into an armed divorce by making the argument inescapable and annual. They won a hemisphere, sent the bill, and the bill came back with muskets. Britain did not collapse. It kept Canada. It expanded in India. It remained a great power. The empire survived. But the 13 colonies, the most economically dynamic part of the pre-war empire, walked out the door and never came back. The victory that felt like global dominance had killed the revenue base that was supposed to pay for it. The asset was gone. The debt remained. Think about the sequence from Havana to Yorktown. The fortress falls. The treasure escapes. The debt accumulates. The garrison costs rise. The tax is designed. The colonists organize. The tax is repealed. The debt demands a new tax. The new tax confirms the suspicion. The suspicion becomes resistance. The resistance becomes war. The war costs more than the original debt. The colonies leave. The empire shrinks. Every single step felt rational to the people making the decision at the time. Grenville ran the numbers correctly under the assumptions he inherited. The colonists defended a constitutional principle they believed was fundamental. Nobody woke up and said, "Let's be stupid and lose North America." The logic was airtight, and the outcome was disaster. That is not a morality tale. That is a fiscal mechanism. And the clerk had seen it coming from the first column of red ink. The flag rose over Havana in 1762. The parade started. The bands played. Somewhere in London, a clerk was already opening a ledger. The ink on the Victory Dispatch wasn't dry yet, and the numbers were already saying something the generals didn't want to hear. Winning this war had just mortgaged the future, and the people who would be asked to pay hadn't even been consulted. The receipt burned down the relationship. The empire kept standing, but the most valuable room walked out. A coin drops onto a wooden desk. It rolls, slows, and settles next to a stack of ledgers. Outside the window, a victory parade is fading into distance. The bands have passed. The crowd has thinned. The flags are being taken down one by one. The silence after the celebration is longer than the celebration itself. And the bill is still on the desk, waiting.